panel discussion, Trust Without Borders, Securing Cross-Border Data in Real-Time Finance. Trust Without Borders, Securing Cross-Border Data in Real-Time Finance. To grace the session, we have our moderator, Mr. Sanjib Subba, founder, Kathmandu FinteK, joining us. Let's welcome sir with a round of applause. And we have Ms. Jessica Renier, Managing Director, Digital Finance Institute of International Finance, joining us. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. Mr. Pramod Rao, Group Chief Risk Officer, PayU, and Mr. Sanjib Parida, Chief Technology Officer, iServeU Technology. A warm welcome to each one of you, and we request Mr. Subba to commence the session. Thank you.
Very good morning, everyone. Glad to be back to GFF for the fourth time in a row. So always exciting. This is a Mahakumbh Mela of FinTech. So I think this is one event that we don't want to miss. So pretty exciting with the esteemed panelists here from diverse background. We've given a topic that's, again, a pretty exciting topic, yet very important as we build a digital economy around the world, like, kind of the borderless economy that every country or continent is trying to build. So trust without borders, securing cross-border data in real-time finance, as the importance of data, particularly in payment, coming up pretty, importantly, with the new innovation, new regulations. So over the past decade, real-time finance has evolved from being an aspiration to an expectation. Payments, settlement, and even compliance checks are increasingly expected to happen in seconds because, as people traveling from the geography to geography and making a payment of instrument issued from one country into another country in real time. Pick here, your Visa or MasterCard are are processed instantly, or UPI for that matter, which is a global payment solution now, right? So, and whose data rules apply? Because you're moving from geography to geography, country to country. So should we restrict the issuer's data or acquirer's data or intermediary countries' data? So who ensures the data is not misused or compromised? So then that comes another issue. Then most importantly, who do we trust in this real-time multi-jurisdictional ecosystem, right? Because we're also talking on the sideline about the need of interoperable data exchange platform, perhaps across border, maybe that would be the solution, but that's not built yet. And who's going to build that? SWIFT, which has come about 30 years back as a cooperative, payment ecosystem stuff, but that's a legacy built system. So how do we move on to the next level? So I have a pretty exciting panel here. Jessica, she brings, the policy and regulatory lens, helping us understand how global frameworks and cooperation can evolve. And Pramod, I have here representing the FinTech innovators' view, where speed, scalability, and user experience are everything. And then we have Sanjib Parida, the technology leader's voice, who builds the actual system that makes all this possible securely in scale. And your moderator, I'm Sanjib. I'm from Kathmandu, and I'm Gen G. Okay? And the G is the last word in the alphabet, so with my age, I'm also on the last stack of G, stuff. But with that note, we'll have, how we have structured is setting the context. That's the segment, 3 to 4 minutes. Then we'll have individual round, group discussion, and rapid fire closing sessions. So let me start with Jessica first, all right? So Jessica, you bring, as a trade, advocacy, the trade block organization, trade in ecosystem association. From your vantage point, what are the most promising frameworks for creating legal pathways that allow cross-border data sharing while respecting national mandates?
Oh, here we go. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay, fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Just for those who aren't as familiar with the Institute of International Finance yet, we are the global association of the financial industry and have about 450 or so members across about 70 countries. So I say that to express kind of the diversity of entities and what we see in trends around the world, to be able to have some perspective on the topic across both banking, insurance, asset management, exchanges, payments companies, and you name it. So I'd say that there are three kind of main structures for data sharing that we see. One is essentially an adequacy approach, where one country determines that another country's system or framework is roughly sufficient or the same as theirs, and calls it adequate, and thus open a kind of free flow of data is possible. This happens, I'd say an obvious example would be the European Union, kind of Europe, and how it interacts with the US and the UK in a lot of ways. There's a second format that is kind of sharing with conditions approach. So a framework that usually sets up predetermined types of data that a country will agree should be shared, but all other types of data is prohibited from being shared. And those types of data might be things that are predetermined to be in the public interest, for example, or other kinds of financial crime type of data, etc. That particular approach, of course, comes with the need to define then what are those appropriate things to predetermine to share, and what sufficient protections around privacy are ahead of time. However, that approach is probably where the most potential for financial technology applications to move the needle forward on data sharing is likely to benefit. And then the third approach is the most restrictive approach, which is essentially a prohibition on sharing data across borders unless expressly told otherwise, and the need to ask for permission each time. That approach tends to come, and now we have seen from an economic standpoint, it tends to have a negative impact on the macroeconomy ultimately, and foreign direct investment, which we've seen in some countries that have pursued that most restrictive approach. A framework that's under discussion right now, but that I think is the most forward-leaning and most kind of aggressive but hopeful framework, particularly in the region. If you look at the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework agreement that's currently under discussion, it certainly encourages data sharing, pending privacy clearly being addressed, and then also works with the various countries that are part of it to have a unified approach to slightly adjusting their data localization requirements to make it possible to share certain kinds of data that tends to be economically beneficial.
No, thank you, Jessica. Very good point. But what I see is like a kind of a good opportunity as we move ahead, where these trading blocks or the economic blocks would come together to create a one uniform data sharing kind of the platform. So I mean, the ASEAN example is kind of moving into that direction. So that sounds, and I hope that NAFTA and EU and the ASEAN all coming together. So let's see how interesting. But anyway, Pramod, you represent the fintech ecosystem. I mean, from that perspective, and the major user and consumer of the payment data. So from your perspective, when building real-time payment and lending product across multiple markets, how do you navigate cross-border data trade-offs, especially under strict localization rules?
Hello. Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about how the fintech space views this. So if you look at the way fintechs operate, it is speed and scale, right? Anything that we do can only sustain if we are able to do it in quick time and be able to build that scale. You can see that in the domestic side, right? The way that we do it today for, shopping on Amazon or anything that, or we get food on Zomato, etc. So it's a very seamless experience. It's something that, customers love, and they just want more of it, right? Now, there is also this aspiration of people that they want to do a similar thing, let's say with Alibaba, or they want to do it with Amazon.com rather than just Amazon.in. And so kind of challenges we are talking about, one that you rightly said was about privacy, data getting shared, the whole debate around sovereignty of data not leaving the country. The regulators are pretty touchy about it. On one hand, the others, of course, is the cybersecurity risks that we talk about, and the new emerging, I would not say new, but the emerging risk that is there is this whole geopolitical risk. I know of, I've heard, and we've done a lot of work around to see how consumers take to this, right? And the customers themselves are not very sure whether they should do it or not. So then the element of trust comes up. How geopolitical risks run, because the relationships that countries have with let's say a China or some of those countries, it becomes extremely difficult for operators like us to be able to enable those kind of payments. In doing so, obviously, when we enable those kind of payments, you're also talking about, moving of data, which is what, we are discussing here. And that is so far still a very contentious issue. We've not been able to get our hands around to say that this is the right way to do it. Not to say, because of the fact that, there are so many challenges, the cost of processing goes up phenomenally, because your whole architecture of how you architecture your transaction, how you architecture your data, and in trying to be compliant is also a challenge. So therefore, the cost of processing goes up, which is not very great news for the consumer at the end of the day, because ultimately it's the consumer who's going to pay for it.
No, agreed. I mean, on that note, let me also point out, this cross-border payments, trade payments has been happening for decades, right? And I think the new challenge is like in the way it is digitized and the data is stored and data is transmitted. But on that note, let me also bring, I'm sure all of you would know, between Nepal and India now, P2P and P2M has been, so when you're traveling to Mount Everest next time, you are able to use your UPI. So make sure when you go to Mount Everest, use your UPI. I mean, for your seamless payment experience. So Sanjib, yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to host Sanjib because we are the real Sanjib with the same spelling, like SNJIB. So this is the authenticate, original Sanjibs, right?
We exchange data then.
Sanjib. Yes, exactly. So I mean, from a CTO's perspective, and you are operating out of different countries, you're based in Dubai. From a CTO's perspective, what are the most critical technology building blocks needed to enable secure cross-border data flows at scale?
Sure. I'll take some reference from what Pramod and you also touched upon. So payments in general, there are two factors to it. One is actually moving the money. And we have been having protocols of moving money since ever. So we are very comfortable between countries to move money, but we are not comfortable to move data. And data in connotation, I'm assuming, would be lower value than actually moving the cash. Now, we are not able to do that because if we have to just go to the granularity of it, data is owned by the customer. It's not a sovereign owned thing. Though it is considered to be, it is somehow made to be understood that my payment data is owned by the country, my payment data actually belongs to me. And because there is, what I believe, because there is no clear way to establish my identity across geographies, there is no clear way to take my consent of what I want to share and what I do not want to share. So we have these overarching structures that let's not move anything because we cannot figure out how to move this particular guy's data for this particular purpose, and just lack of having those structures. though technically it is possible. So we have privacy-enabled technologies today. We have consent management systems. There are encryption mechanisms which are bulletproof encryption mechanism, like a KCAC hashing has been found out that it cannot be cracked at all. And that kind of encryption should make anybody comfortable. Like if I only want to share my data with you, technology exists. There is science behind it. Everything is there. But just because I'm not able to figure out how to do it, I'm not making those investments of how to do it. Number one, there are overarching directives or do not do it. And because of that, innovation is also taking a backstage over here, where, like, let's say today we run switches in 4 different countries. In all these different countries, we run the same stack, same technology, everything same, just that we have to replicate into different data centers. That is increasing cost. That is reducing reliability. Our monitoring capacity goes down. We are having to incur compliance cost in multiples in every quarter that we have to do these certifications. We have to, and the purpose it is solving is the same thing. No innovation, zero innovation, but we spend money on that. And that is not good for the world. So we have to think of how to get there. While the technology exists, we are still doing something that is Stone Age in terms of technology.
I mean, pretty interesting perspective. Sanjib and I come from the similar background where the card, I also spent quite some time into card, the switch industry. So on that note, data residency, and you also brought the topic of right to reject and right to recall, right? So the consent, the technology can give you that options, but, how to make it seamless? So the challenge for the consumer is, and are these data real? I mean, is the hype being created by the government around this data? This is what the discussion we had on the sideline. So are these data actually the kind of, is the hype is really real?
In major economic blocks, if you say like European Union, in US, in some parts of the GCC, today there are very, very fine printed open banking regulations, open banking API regulations. And by virtue of this, banks are comfortable, basically competing entities. Banks are competing entities to each other. They're competing for customers, competing for CASA, competing for everything. Competing entities are comfortable to share data between each other in real time with the consent of the customers, because there is a regulator which said, okay, do it. That means that is trusted, and that is a trusted way to operate things. But between countries, it doesn't exist because there is no overarching regulator to do that, who ensures, okay, everybody will operate in good faith over there. And second, which is the point I was highlighting, I believe there is a lack of a way to establish identity across borders. Like I have my Aadhaar card, my PAN card, my 5 different coordinates, my passport, which identifies I am Sanjib Parida and not Sanjib Subba, right? But in Nepal, I could go and say, I'm Sanjeev, and if I have access to your bank account, your data, I'll be very happy to do that. You're a millionaire.
I'd love to have your access to Dubai account. Right. So anyway, with that note, okay, we're getting into the second round group discussion now, all right? So jump in anytime. So I think the first question here is cross-cutting questions. Trust frameworks, global interoperability that we touched upon, requires a common trust framework. Actually, it is all about the trust is the key word here, right? And trust framework across regulators, banks, and fintech. What could realistically serve as that framework? Is it technology standards, legal agreements, or supervisory coordination? And who should lead it?
I have a couple of thoughts, and actually, just in reacting to your points, I think that data can cross borders between certain countries, but in a bilateral or a multilateral way, and where agreements have been put in place. But it cannot cross borders just globally everywhere seamlessly at all right now. And there certainly are any number of task forces at a global level, including from the OECD and other entities that have created explicit task forces to examine how to facilitate the better flow of data across borders, because there's broad recognition that by doing that, the whole global financial system benefits. And so I think right now that's where you see some agreements between countries where they have assessed their privacy standards. standards to be relatively the same. It's a tough issue, though, because countries certainly have all kinds of national imperatives to make their own judgments about what is necessary for them.
Right.
Yeah, so you talked about trust, right? So I'm just trying to link up another perspective to that. I think all the regulations or all the privacy laws that are there, I mean, I last Googled it, I think more than 100 countries have that have passed a law. Now, what is common across all this is that they're all trying to do the same thing, right? And for a moment, we are not saying what they're trying to do is wrong, right? The data, like you said, is the customers. It's not owned by anybody else but the customer. And the law is supposed to protect the customer. But in having 100 plus laws, it becomes extremely difficult for an entity to do business across geographies. We have tried and tested systems like SWIFT, etc., which facilitates payments, but that was a different era. That was, I mean, they still work. I mean, they still stand the test of time. They're trusted. But I think what the world is really looking for is something which is quicker and which can be at scale, which is where, the fintechs kind of play a role. Now, what we are trying to find is that sweet spot between which can balance and bring all these elements together, to bring the trust, bring the speed, bring the scale all together there. At the same time, you would want to be compliant to all the laws and so on. Now, what is that sweet spot, is something that we've not been able to crack. And I think it's not something that an industry will be able to crack. It requires multilateral collaboration between regulators, not only of one country, but multiple regulators and the central banks and so on, to build that kind of trust. So I think the trust is the key here. I think the focus has been on punitive action. It's not, none of the laws have looked at it from an enabling point of view. It has all been punitive in nature. So therefore, I think even the mindset of the people creating the law or the regulators or the industry has to shift from there to more, to try and get more customer centric, because it's the customer at the end of the day who owns his own data, right? So we need to do what the customer wants, not what somebody else wants.
No, I mean, very interesting perspective, but that also, when we're talking about, bringing the uniformity, interoperability, the need of the different jurisdiction and the regulator is popping up, right? And that is where both the opportunity and challenge is. How to bring all these regulatory into same page and same frame, because everyone would come up their own national interests and agenda behind it. And then there are examples where unregulated, like FinTech, I'm not allowed to take the name, so you have to guess it. So unregulated FinTech stuffs are just built on fully, the individual trust and it is scale, and the trust, right? But anyway, Sanjib.
But isn't it very apparent that the regulators across the world will never sit across the table and start and decide that from tomorrow onwards, this is how we share data, right? But within that, we'll also have to understand one thing, that what kind of data is needed to be shared and what is not needed to be shared. For example, it's my personal belief, and I would maybe from a use case perspective, we can attest to that. Data in aggregate, there is no need for sharing. For example, if somebody were to come in and say, okay, give me India's whole UPI data, any UPI transaction that has happened in India, now Mr. Trump wants access to that. There is no use for that. So data in isolation, data which is connected to a payer or a payee, is only required in that isolation. And those kind of form factors we are already dealing with. What is missing is a common protocol percolating to everybody. It doesn't have to be that a regulator goes and tells this is how we do it, because SWIFT is not governed by a regulator. It's a company, it's a private limited company which has gone across the world, convinced a bunch of banks, okay, this is how we do business. Not SWIFT, there are companies like Thunes, there are companies like TerraPay who have been able to do the same. So that is what is required. Like for payment industry, like in cards, there is ISO 8583, and that is what every bank, every financial institution, acquiring issuer, everybody understands. They have agreed that this is a protocol we operate in. There needs to be an industry-defined, agreed form of data exchange, which is individual data exchange, because data in aggregate, I believe there is no need for it to travel cross-border.
All right. Thank you, Sanjib. Let me move to second one, like kind of correlated to what you just mentioned. Technology versus regulation, privacy enhancing technologies like federated learning, tokenization, or zero knowledge proofs, for example, allow value sharing without moving raw data, right? Are these genuine game changers, or will regulation continue to dominate how data can move? Any one of you can.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that regulation will still determine it, but regulation will determine it in part based on what is technologically possible to meet the regulatory objectives. So if the objective is privacy and there is technology that helps protect privacy and only provides a certain kind of data to cross borders that is absolutely necessary, and thus it meets the regulatory objective, then the regulators are more likely to be okay with it. But at the end of the day, no technology is going to beat a government's position on what it wants to do. So I think technology is necessary, and there's a lot of opportunities there. And then still from a policy standpoint, though, regulators need to support the use of that technology to achieve an objective.
Right. Mm-hmm.
See, the way computer cryptography has evolved, there is answer to everything. There is answer to consent, there is answer how the data will be protected, everything is there. What is not there is trust on that. And finance, payments, being an industry that kind of trails the technology curve a little bit. It's not at the cutting edge of the technology all the time, because there is apprehension that the new technology may not be working, is what may have been causing a lot of this. Is for what is mainstream today in computer cryptography as a technology, that percolating into the base core of financial engines, it will take about like there will be a gestation period for that. And till that point of time, we'll have to worry about it. And there is a trend across the globe to see that embedded technologies, origination of the technologies, is fear around it. That, okay, I'll not use a Huawei router because it is manufactured in a so-and-so country and there may be something with it. I'll not use a Huawei phone. I'll not use a so-and-so. But if that was the case, Linux is developed by a Finnish guy on which about 99% of the computing across the world runs. But does that mean Finland controls the world?
Exactly.
No, it doesn't.
No, right. Exactly.
So there is proof enough that it doesn't work that way, but the fear always rests because there is a certain industry which makes money out of the fear. And I believe if we'll someday get to a world,
we don't want to open that Pandora's box right now, because that leads to, oh man, think about it, right? Okay, my final group question: balancing speed and security. Real-time finance demands speed, but compliance and security checks create friction. How do we design systems that maintain both speed and security across borders?
Well, as I said, it starts with identity. Unless we will be able to establish identity across borders, that notion of being convenient doesn't exist. Because convenience and speed, convenience and security, there is always a trade-off to that. And I believe Pramod, he runs a payment aggregator network. He understands that the more easy you make it, you'll have to reduce a certain amount of guardrails. And for example, I don't know, like most of you would have experienced booking a ticket on IRCTC. It's so difficult to do it, right? And I believe it is by design. I don't know, yeah. But that difficulty may be making it more secure, but it's inconvenient. Like somebody like me will never use it the way it is. So hence it's a trade-off all the time. And I believe that trade-off is decided. Like for example, UPI is I believe a little bit less secure than maybe a card network. But then the transaction size is also less. So hence that works out over there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pramod?
Yeah. So I think the way I look at it is we need to do a few things. I think the way we've approached it is, obviously your data needs to be classified in terms of what is it that doesn't leave the country, what is it that is hot, what cannot do. So basically have a data classification done. Have, use RegTech well, so that you know exactly what are the law that you are within or what you are breaching and so on, so that you're not caught for any surprise. And of course, a zero trust architecture, so that so that you're secure from the cyber side, and overlay an interoperability across the ecosystem in a way that data, the cyber risks, etc., get balanced and get things. So it's just like the example you gave of Swift or something like that, but at a different scale.
Yeah. Right. More acceptable, more widely
and interoperable. So it becomes easy for everybody to just join that.
Yeah, Jessica.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the speed versus security standpoint, I think this is a really important trade-off and discussion because it is a trade-off, right? While we try to work towards speed and security, at some point there are friction points in the system, and they aren't just an annoyance. They are actually there to enable something to be more secure in some cases. And I think in the last 5 years, the G20 has set out a payments roadmap where we've been trying to move globally the payment structure towards faster, cheaper, more transparent, and more inclusive payments. But I would note that, and as a lot of people have noted over the last 5 years, that the word secure got left out of that statement. And I don't think that was the intention of the G20, but it did get left out of that statement. And I think that there has, as we've seen rising levels of fraud globally that are damaging to the real economies potentially of some countries, that is something that has come back up as something that's quite important. So in terms of speed versus security, also from a cross-border standpoint, over the last 5 years, as we've looked to increase the speed of payments, the cross-border component of the payment is no longer the place where we're lacking speed. The issue is really the last mile, the final leg of the payment that is domestic issue that's very specific to each country. As opposed to the cross-border aspect. And I think a lot of times we talk about all of the issues being in a cross-border issue. And in this case, the speed issue really comes down to that last mile, which is a domestic issue where we've gotten it to. But security is starting to, rightfully so, come back much more into focus because of issues around fraud, which we certainly want to address globally. And I would expect those will probably be probably a greater focus of the upcoming G20 presidency, with the U.S. taking over that presidency in January.
Anything last word that you'd like to add? Checking. All right. Okay. Yeah. Just one word solution.
As I've been reiterating, we need to figure out ways of how to establish identity across borders. Unless we do that, we will be talking about this maybe next year. This will be a perpetual panel. We can participate. We can enroll it for next 10 years. Yes. Unless there is cross-border identity, unless I am identifiable in Nepal with some reference to how I am identified in India, nobody in Nepal will trust my UPI payments because it's not real-time settlement. A merchant is giving me stuff, giving me a plate of Maggi on Mount Everest by accepting my UPI payment because they believe the bank will give them that money the next day in the next settlement cycle. Right. If they do not believe that, there is no payment, there is no exchange of value. And for that belief to come in, some identity exchange has to happen, or else we'll be talking about the same thing every time.
Right. Pramod, any last word?
Well, I hope there was a single, word solution for it. I agree with Sanjib on that it is not an easy code to crack. But it will have to, we will have to do that in case you want to make progress on cross-border. I think data with the DPDP also now, imminent that it'll come up, it'll get operational. So it's going to be a challenge.
Shall we close it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. I think there's some glitch at the app. Any questions from the floor? Anyone? Since I think we are pressed for time, so I think thank you for a wonderful discussion. My takeaway from this session is certainly there are both issues and opportunities as the digital payment and the digital economy moves to the next level. So I think the regulator, the jurisdiction would have to open up more. I think the future is where the commerce, the economy, and the people, consumer meets at one point, and ideally that would be interoperable data exchange platform accepted by everyone. And I hope we'll move into that direction sooner or later. The cross-border payment is rapidly increasing globally as the trade and the travel both taking at a greater speed. So we'll have to, find a way to make it more seamless and more efficient. So with that note, thank you to the...
Just one thing I'd like to add.
Right.
I think the company that looks at it as a burden is going to be left behind. I think it has to look at it as a feature rather than a bug.
Right.
The moment you start looking at it as a bug, you're not going to make any headway. So I think it's also a mindset issue. So the ones who are willing to stick their neck out and say this is something that I'm going to add as a feature to my product line or my offering, they're going to go a long way.
Perfect, Pramod. So with that note, thank you, and I hope to see you in Mount Everest. The season for mountaineering has started. So this is my commercial promoting my own country. So I hope to see you back in the Everest Base Camp very soon. I am a trekker, so join me.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Subba.